Give me faith to trust what you say. That you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside. Give me... Go to the chorus. That is the chorus. Well, never mind. It means a lot, doesn't it? My flesh may fail, but you're my God, you never will. Give me faith to trust what you say. That's what I was looking at. That is what the message is about this morning. How many of y'all believe that God knows better than you do? How many of y'all always act like you really believe that? And so that's the difference. Sometimes we trust God to be right, but we don't trust Him enough to do it His way. I'm glad you're here this morning. If you would take your program, pull this tab off. We call it a connection card. It's how we get a record of your visit. It's also how we get your prayer requests. We're going to pass the baskets here in just a moment. So if you have prayer requests, go ahead and write those down. The basket pastor will come by in a minute, and the prayer team will pray for those concerns. But if you want me to be the only one that sees it, then mark it confidential. But I encourage you, mark it for the prayer team. Those people do a great job of praying for those concerns. We are going to pray here in a moment, turn it back over to Van to continue to lead us in worship. But before we do that, we want to worship through giving. So you can do that through our app. You can do that by texting to give, or you can just drop it in the basket or in the box in the back. So if the ushers will come forward at this time, we'll pray, and then we will collect the offering and continue to worship through song. Dear God, we thank you so much for the opportunity we have to do what that song that we just sang and talked about, God. To know that your love is great, to know that you're good, but then to realize that our flesh is going to fail. We're not going to be able to accomplish what you called us to do if we do it in our own strength. But God, you never fail. You are totally and completely in control. If we do things your way, God, we may not see how, but it's going to work out the way you intended for it to work out. So help us to have the faith it takes to trust you more than we trust our own ways. God, as we collect this tithes, we collect this offering, I pray that you would use it to not only further your kingdom, but God, use it to change our hearts. Use it as a demonstration of our trust in you, that we trust you know better than we do, and that we'll just do what you say because you said to do it. For in Jesus' name we ask.
has done for us. You guys sing this next song with me. There's a reason why the curse of sin is broken. There's a reason why the darkness runs from light. There's a reason why we stand here now forgiven. Jesus is alive. There's a reason why we are not overtaken. There's a reason why we sing on through the night. There's a reason why our hope remains eternal. Jesus is alive. Praise the King, He is risen. Praise the King, He's alive. Praise the King, death's defeated. Hallelujah, He's alive. Hallelujah, He's alive. There's a reason why our hearts can be courageous. There's a reason why the dead are made alive. There's a reason why we share His resurrection. Jesus is alive. Praise the King, He is risen. Praise the King, He's alive. Praise the King, death's defeated. Hallelujah, He's alive. Yes, we sing. Hallelujah, He's alive. The angels sing with us this morning. Sing. The grave could not ignore it. All of heaven's roaring. And where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? Earth could not ignore it. All the saints are roaring. And where is our victory? Death, where is your sting? Earth could not ignore it. All of heaven's roaring. And where is our victory? Death, where is your sting? One more time. Earth could not ignore it. When all the saints are roaring. And where is our victory? Death, where is your sting? Praise the King, He is risen. Praise the King, He's alive. Praise the King, death's defeated. Hallelujah, He's alive. Hallelujah, He's alive. Yes, we sing. Oh, hallelujah, He's alive. Hallelujah, He's alive. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we pray to you this morning. We thank you that the grave could not contain you. And Lord, as the world looks on, as we come to know you, as we win people for Christ, Lord, let us focus on the relationship that we have with you. Let us cherish it always. We thank you. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You guys can be seated.
What is this?
Donuts.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I can have them.
You can have them all.
These are for me.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. You look hungry.
That is a good donut.
All right. Well, I got to hit the road. You mind if I just take one for the road? Just one.
Well, I am really hungry and I missed breakfast this morning. Probably missed lunch. And I was gonna take these home to my wife and kids. Really, to be honest, they gotta last me a whole week.
James 1:17, it talks about how all good gifts come from God. We seem to know that. If you haven't figured it out, we're talking about money this morning. Okay, no mad rush for the door, we did good. I wasn't sure how y'all would respond to that. As a pastor, it's always a little awkward for me to talk about money, and here's why. When I talk about money, I always worry that there's a guest here, they're going to think this is all we ever talk about, or they're going to think that I'm after their money, or the church is after their money, and that's not the case. I've had people tell me, why don't you talk about something more spiritual than how you handle your money? Why don't you talk about something, that's why I came to church. And the truth is, there's nothing more spiritual to talk about than your money. The truth is, I preach about money because God talks a lot about money. The truth is, we talk about this issue because Jesus talked about this issue. We talk about this issue because God knows that the chief competitor of your heart is your money. And so God is interested. Here may be a surprise to y'all. How many of y'all know that God is interested in your money? One or two. Wow, that's a surprise. God is interested in your money, how you get it, how you spend it, how you save it, and how you share it. How we handle money is sort of a supreme test of where our heart is. Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 says, wherever your heart is, there the desires of your heart will be also. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. You may have heard of a famous preacher named Adrian Rogers. He said this one time. He says, a faith that hasn't reached your wallet probably hasn't reached your heart. There's a lot of truth to that, right? Another expression that you hear a lot of times is put your money where your mouth is, right? If you say something is true, then you do and you demonstrate things that show that you believe it. Money is something that we use every day. Okay, so money is something that I don't have a whole lot of, but I have more than most people in the world have. And I may not have as much as you have, or you may not have as much as I have. And I'm not responsible for how much money that, Philip's rich. I'm not responsible for how much money Philip has, right? I'm not responsible for how much money you have, because you got a lot of money too. I'm only responsible for how much money I have. And I'm only responsible for doing those things. And so how can Jesus be our Lord in our life if he's not Lord over every area of our life, including what we do with money? Now, some people think God thinks money is a bad thing. That's not true. The Bible does not say money is the root of all evil. How many of y'all heard that and thought that was true? Right? That's not true. That verse actually says the love of money is the root of all evil. So, evil is usually directly or indirectly traced back to someone's love for money, possessions, and those sort of things. And there's nothing more spiritual that we could talk about today than our attitude towards stuff and our attitude towards money. Now, I want to point out that God is not really so concerned with your money as he is concerned with your heart. And he realizes the two are so closely connected. He talks a lot about this issue. He's not so much concerned about your money as he is concerned about what your money demonstrates about your heart. Jesus said a lot about this. You realize that he gave 36 parables and 16 of them had to do with our attitude towards finances? Do you realize that when you remember the stories Jesus told and the things that he encountered with his disciples, I think about the widow and her mite. I think about the fact that she came in and she was giving these 2 little coins that were less than a penny, and she dropped them in, and she didn't want any attention for it. She just moved on, and Jesus started to applaud. His disciples says, "What?" She goes, "That widow just gave more than all these other people in the room." And they were confused because people were giving lots and lots of money. She dropped in two coins worth less than a penny. He says, but she gave all she had. See, Jesus is not so much concerned with dollars and cents as he is percentages. He's not so much concerned. See, what impresses him is the faith behind the gift, not the amount of the gift in total. Because see, it's not about how much you give. Does God need your money? The truth is he doesn't. He owns everything anyway. He could, just like he made food fall out of the sky in the Old Testament, he could make money. That would be nice. What if it just rained money in here this morning? Y'all come back to church every Sunday, wouldn't you? Money just dropping out the ceiling, your stuff in your pockets, and you're leaving, you're good for the week. But see, God could do that if he chose to, but that's not the way that he usually chooses to operate. He actually does bless us with lots and lots of money, but instead of it showing up here, coming out of the ceiling, he sends it to your bank account through your job, or he sends it to your bank account through whatever you've inherited, or however it ends up in your bank account, and he expects you to return part of it to him. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The shrewd manager, he talked about that. He gave a parable of a guy who owned a lot of stuff, and he entrusted a manager to manage it. He found out the manager was skimming off the top, and the whole story has to do with our attitude towards money. He talked about the rich young ruler who came to him and wanted to follow him. That's in Luke chapter 18. The whole story has to do with the attitude of our money being more important. That guy ended up not following Jesus because the Bible says he went away sad because he was very wealthy. But there's a statement, right? How many of you think if you won the lottery and got lots and lots of money, you wouldn't go away sad? You'd be surprised how many people go away sad. It's not about the money, it's about your heart. Clearly God is interested in your money. He talks about it so much. I tell you who else is interested in your money. It's not just God. There's this other being in the universe, and some people don't believe he exists. That's one of his greatest lies. But Satan is interested in your money. Did you know that Satan is interested in your money? It is his desire to keep you under a curse and under bondage and under his control through your money. The best way that he has figured out to keep you in bondage to sin is through how you think and where your heart goes when it comes to the attitude towards money. Have you ever used flypaper? Anybody ever used flypaper? I grew up in Florida, and in Florida we had flies all the time because it's just a lot of water around, a lot of lakes, a lot of stuff. And so we would hang, my mom, my dad, I say we, I was a kid. My mom and dad would hang flypaper around the carport. I thought, this is the nastiest thing, right? Because the flies would basically fly in there, and the whole concept is this stuff is sticky, right? How many of you have ever used that stuff before? Oh, good. So somebody knows what I'm talking about. And the flies are attracted to it, but when they land on it, they get stuck. And the question I always ask Mom is, why in the world would they land on it to start with? All the places in the carport that they can land on, why are they drawn to this flypaper? She said, because the surface is coated with something really sweet. She said, now don't go licking it, because your tongue will get stuck to it. She said, but it's coated with a honey-like substance that's very, very sticky. And so the flies are flying around, and the flies thinking to himself, if flies can think, I don't know if flies think or not, their brain's pretty small, right? But they're thinking to themselves, they're thinking, I want something sweet, I want some honey. Oh, I'm going to get honey, 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 honey. And he gets on the flypaper, right? And now the fly's thinking, I'm stuck. I'd like to fly away, right? I'm stuck. I can't fly away. And that's what the fly is thinking, because he dies. He ends up stuck to that thing that he was seeking after, and then he ends up dead. I know that's a gross picture. That's why we didn't put it up to just now, right? But here's what happens if those of you that have ever put these up, they end up covered with flies. Now listen, if I'm a fly, and I know flies aren't that bright, but if I'm a fly and I see 1,200 of my friends stuck to this thing, I'm not flying over there. Many people today run around saying things like, I want money, I just need more money. If I just had a little more money, if I just had a little more money, I just want some more money. And before they know it, money has them. And it's not that they haven't seen a bunch of the other people stuck in the same situation. It's not that they haven't seen, listen, the love of money is the root of all evil. Here's the clue. You don't have to have a lot of it to love it. You know, you can be stumped by money because you think you don't have enough. You can love money and not have a lot of it. That is important to understand. It's not just people who are rich who go through this. As a matter of fact, I know more people who their love and wish for money is greater cause of their sin than people who have a lot of it sometimes. People who have a lot of money, sometimes they mismanage it, but people who don't have a lot of money, sometimes they will scheme, cheat, and do what they know is wrong to get it. God is interested in your money. Satan is interested in your money. But more importantly, I know one other person who's interested in your money. You are interested in your money. How many of y'all would say that's not true for me? Let's see where the liars are. Okay. You are interested in your money. How many of y'all are not interested in your money? Then you need to hire somebody to manage your money for you because you're going to do a terrible job. Many people today run around saying they want money. They are interested in their money. And I asked the question because I needed to know. I asked, I was wondering here at Highland Park, people who meet here, gather here for worship on a regular basis, I wondered how many of us tithe. Now we're going to talk about what that word means here in a minute. But what do you think that number would be? How many people do you think tithe? Since nobody wants to guess, I'll go ahead and tell you. 16% of us tithe. That's based on the numbers of average attendance and what the average income would be, and based on, it's an equation, it's not perfect, but best we can figure out, about 16% tithe. Nationally, they say about 20% of church attenders tithe, but obedience is not about being the average church. And the reason I bring this up is not to listen, don't worry, we're not going to have a hand-raising service where everybody's like, who gives? I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know who gives. I'm just concerned about you. And so this morning, I want to talk to you about, are you being obedient to this? The reason we're talking about this is not because we're behind budget. Guess what? We're ahead of the budget this year. So far, right? We are. We're ahead of the budget. You've seen it in the link last week. We're ahead of the budget. This is not a question of, oh no, we're in trouble. This is a question of, are you missing God's best because you're not doing things God's way? This is a question of, is your heart being led astray and away from God because of your treasure or your fear of losing what you have? Are you being obedient to God? The word tithe literally means 1/10. That's what the word translates to. It is literally a tenth. It's God's perfect plan for how his message should be carried around the world and how his people should be discipled and grown into wisdom. God's wisdom, he created this plan. It's a method of giving. It's completely fair. It's completely equal to all who obey, and it makes perfect sense, right? And the reason we say it that way is because God doesn't expect me to give on the level of someone who makes 6 figures. But he does expect me to give on the level where I am. And he doesn't expect a single mom who's struggling to give on the level that he expects from me. He expects each of us to give on the level where we are. And in his wisdom, God created this plan. I want to point out that this is God's idea, not mine. And the scripture is full of that. We don't give, by the way, here's another thing I want to point out in this video that we showed at the beginning, it points it out very clearly. We don't give to God, we think we do. What we do is we return to God a percentage of what he gives to us. In that video, that guy gets a free box of donuts, right? And the guy who gives it to him, he says, can I grab one on the way out? Just one? I don't know, I don't think so. And he kind of, and we think to ourselves, how stupid is that, right? But how many of us do that with God? How many of us, he gives us all good things come from him, right? All of our blessings. And some of you are like, well, no, I worked hard for my paycheck. Who God gave you the strength to be able to hold that job? Who allowed you to have the education to get that job? Who allowed you the brain power to be able to think your way through an interview? Who allowed you to not be fired that time that you acted really stupid and the boss decided to overlook it. You know, God blesses us, and we just tend to not want to follow through with what He's designed and asked us to do. Now, why He designed it this way, I don't know. This is just the way He did it. I could probably spend the rest of the time telling you how I think why, whatever, but none of that really matters. We just have to realize this is God's plan. And there are three kinds of people in this room right now. There are some that have already tuned me out about, okay, message about money, go to sleep, right? I'll deal with this later. You know, and some of you are thinking, it's all mine. I worked hard for it. I earned it. I deserved it. I can do whatever I want to with it. And you are absolutely true and correct about that. But when the offering basket came by, they also decided, some of them, to give, and they gave because they just decided they wanted to. And that's okay. But it's not God's plan. There are other people in the room that tithe, and they believe that the tithe belongs to God, and the rest is for me to use and to do what I will choose with. In obedience, they give 10% of what they make to the church to do further God's work, and they think that I can do what I want to with the rest, and they are absolutely correct too. Because here's the thing: God gives you a choice to follow His own. You know, God can make you tithe. He chooses not to. He wants it to be your decision to follow His instructions. It's a simple test, but it's a test. You know, the question is, do you think of it as yours, or do you think of 10% of it belonging to God? And here's the truth. I know, because I know these people, there is a third group of people in this room. There's a third group of people in this room that they realize the truth that it all belongs to God. And He has required us to give 10% of it back, and they joyfully do that, but then they manage the rest of it according to His principles, because they realize that it's not their money anyway, it's God's money. And so, should I spend God's money on, and you fill in the blank, and that's a question they ask when they make out their budget. Should I spend God's money to do certain things? Should I spend God's money to help people? Should I spend God? And they manage their money, and they judge what they do with their money by that. They return to Him what is commanded, and they understand the rest of it has been entrusted to them to manage. Listen, man, part of managing that is for you to live a good life. Part of managing that is for you to have, you know, a good meal every now and then, for you to have groceries, for you to send your kids to school, for you to do all the things that the God commands you to do. And by the way, if you study the Scripture, He tells you even how to do some of that. He teaches you how to give. He teaches you how to save. And He teaches you how to live on the rest. And that's important for us to understand. There's a radical difference between the first two groups and that third group, though. They think of themselves, the first two groups, think of themselves as the owners. They own the money. It's their money. And they think they might share some of it with God. I'll share with God when I want to. I'll share with God when I have to. I'll share with God, and He'll share with me, and that'll be okay. But I want us to understand that when we return a tithe, it's not really something we're sharing with God. It's something God has already shared with us. All He's asking, He's like the guy who brought us a box of donuts and says, can I have one of those as I'm leaving? All God is saying is, I want to use 10% of what I've blessed you with to bless other people and to move the bar forward to reaching our mission, which is to reach the definition of getting all people around the world to understand the truth, and to help those who already understand the truth to learn to walk in it more faithfully. And that is what God is calling us to do. But here's the point. He doesn't even need our money to do that. Do you know that God could do it without it? This church does more on less money than any church I've ever known. Somehow or another, we get it done. And that is not because we're smart. Trust me, right? No offense to our finance team, but there's no billionaires or lawyers or doctors in this room, right? But we do more on less because God is involved and because God provides what we need. And here's the truth. God can do more with the 10% that we give Him than we could do with 100% of it. If you'll just take the 90%, He will allow you to do more with 90% if you'll follow Him than you could ever do on your own. God has a plan, and it's a very clear plan. The very first part of that is a very defined portion. a very defined portion, a very definite portion or percentage, however you want to look at it. 10% is very easy to calculate, right? I was not good at math, but I can do this. I learned this lesson a long time ago. Basically, when I was a little kid, my neighbor 2 doors down paid me to mow her grass. But even before that, when I lost a tooth, the tooth fairy, quote unquote, right, would leave a quarter under my pillow. Now, for you young people in the room, I know y'all get folding money for teeth. Well, my teeth weren't that valuable. I got a quarter. And even as a child, I had already accepted Jesus in my heart before I lost all my teeth. And so when I got a quarter, the next Sunday, I would go to my dad or my mom, and I would get change. And they'd say, why do you want change for your quarter? I said, well, because I need to tithe on my quarter. So 10% would be 2.5 pennies, so I want to give 3 pennies. And I would do that. It's a habit I developed. But that was easy. But then when I started mowing Miss Maxine's yard, she paid me $1. Now that was serious. But then I had 10 dimes. And 3 cents is easy to part with, but a whole dime, this is in the 80s, y'all. That was a big deal for me, right? But I did that. And I got older, and things continued, and before long, that just went everywhere. Before long, I started making a little more. Now, I know this is hard for some of y'all to figure. I'm dealing with math right now. But then I started getting these folding things. I ended up with 10 of these. Truth is, I had to borrow 3 of them from Renee and 3 from Allison. I have enough this morning. But I got them now. And every time I got 10 of these, the next Sunday when I went to church, I gave one. And here's what I figured out. I still had plenty left. Some of y'all are like, well, yeah, duh, because you lived in your mom's house, you weren't paying the rent, you didn't have a car payment. All that's true, but I had enough to do what God needed me to do. And there were times where I didn't think I had enough, but I would save. Because I would give one to God, and then usually I would put one in the piggy bank, and then I would buy whatever candy and toys and whatever I wanted with these. Now that sounds really simple. We teach our kids that practice, and that's a good way to go. And it's easy to give $1 when you got $10, right? Because now I still got plenty. And then there were times where we had missionaries come to the church and they talk about starving kids in Africa, and I'd give too. Because I still had plenty. And there was one time where a missionary was real persuasive, and I was crying, so I just gave it all. And I still ate that week, and Mom still fed me, and things worked fine. And y'all like, that's fine for you, but what about when you get older, and those $1 turn into these $100 bills? Oh, this is fake money right here. But let's pretend it's real. Say I have 100 of these. That's a lot of money, right? Now we're talking about some money. Y'all remember your first paycheck, your first real paycheck, like somebody wrote a paycheck and just paid you if you're paying in the yard? And mine wasn't this much. But is it easier to give one of these or one of these? Yeah. See, he knows. But here's the truth. Is there any difference between these in the eyes of God? 10% is still 10%, right? So that's what's supposed to happen. It's very, very simple, and it's very, very easy for a child. And some of you are like, well, yeah, if you're dealing with round figures, that's easy. But, my money comes out a little odd, and it's hard. I got, say my check is $482, and what's 10% of that? Well, here's an easy way to figure that out. Just move the decimal point one place. Those of you that are math wizards, what would the tithe on $482 be? $48.26, right? It's not that hard. But the question is, will you be obedient? See, it's not about the math. We want to make it about the math, and I get all kinds of questions after messages like this. Well, am I supposed to tithe on the gross or on the net income? Am I supposed to tithe based on this, and is it just 10%? Does that include what I give to the Lions Club? Does that include? And I'm like, listen, here's the answer to all those questions. How much do you want God to bless you? God's people, throughout all of history, have maintained the practice of returning 10% to Him. God put this in the heart of His people. You can go all the way back to Genesis chapter 14 and see this. We're not going to take time to read all these passages this morning, but God put this in the heart of His people. He said, this is how you will do these things. The Old Testament law had not even been given yet, and people were doing this. And then you see, Abraham honored that principle. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 22, there was a memorial pillar set up, and they began to play a place for worship. And Abraham said, I will present to God a tenth of everything that He's given me. He was already honoring this principle. And Jacob, we're not going to talk much about this, but Jacob continued that principle. And then we see later in the Bible that Moses came along, and God literally gave it to him in writing from the New Testament. From the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30 through 34, God says that you're supposed to return that tithe. 100 years later, Malachi confirms this and is still talking about it. Malachi begins to talk about this. This verse in Malachi, here's what it says. Go ahead and put that on the screen. It says, bring all the tithe into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do so, says the Lord, heaven's armies will open the windows of heaven for you, and I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. Look at this next part. Try it and put me to the test. And then a few years later, Jesus comes along, and a lot of people will argue, well, that's an Old Testament thing. Jesus actually commended people for doing this. Look at Matthew 23:23. He says, you should tithe. Jesus talking. You should tithe, yes, but don't neglect the more important things. Jesus was saying, see, a lot of people want to focus on the second part. He was talking about taking care of your elderly parents, right, in this particular passage. And he's saying, tithe, you should do that. But in addition to that, he's saying not only the 10%, but what are you doing with the rest of it? You should use that in a way that honors me. And Jesus said the tithe, what he's basically saying with this verse is that's the elementary, basic foundation level. How many of y'all know that 2 plus 2 equals 4? How many of y'all knew that? 789 times 283 is what? A big number, but you have to learn the 2 plus 2 thing first, right? This is the first step, and you build up to the quadratic equations and all that later. The basic part of our faith in learning to trust God, learning to place our heart and our affections towards Him versus towards our money and our stuff, is simply to give 10% back to Him. Jesus is saying, I expect more from you than just money. The 10% is the basic elementary thing. He said, I expect you to begin to have your personality become more like mine. I expect you to begin to have faith and mercy and justice and to live a life that honors me. I expect those things from you. The tithe thing, that's just the starting point. The tithing thing, God says, yeah, that should be like a given. And all these other things, listen, He says the fruit of the Spirit should be developing in you. We talked about this last week. Those are the things that are going to impress God. Listen, don't think God's impressed because you give 10%. That's sort of what you're supposed to do. How many of y'all are happy with your kids when their chore for the night is to put the dishes in the dishwasher? Listen, kids, if they ask you to put the dishes in the dishwasher, I had to hand wash dishes every Tuesday and Thursday night when I was a kid. We didn't have a dishwasher. Now, back in the 1900s when I grew up, we didn't have a microwave, we didn't have a dishwasher. You know, I'm old, so y'all think it's hard to load the dishwasher. Just do what you're told. And listen, I don't get excited when my kids do what they're told. Actually, sometimes I get upset when they don't. And I don't want you to think that God is after your money or that He's going to get upset if you don't do what you're told. I want you to understand the truth. And the truth is, God wants you to do this because He knows it's good for you. He knows that it keeps you from being attached to your money. Look what happens, basically, when you talk about this tithe thing. Abraham, he started this, right? God sort of put it on the hearts of His people and began with Abraham. So Abraham basically commenced it. I try to make these all C's. And then Jacob continued it. And then Moses commanded it because God commanded it. And then Malachi confirmed it. And then Jesus comes along and He commences. He says it's good. He says that's a good thing. So if all this is true, if Abraham starts it, and Jacob continues it, and Moses commands it because God said to, and Malachi says, yeah, that's true. And then Jesus comes along, he says, that's true too. If all these people, and if God's word says that, who am I to try to cancel it? You know, a lot of people think that I make the rules for what we do here. The truth is, God's word makes the rules. We just simply follow and obey those things. Besides the New Testament, some people, I love that argument. Well, most of the stuff about tithing is in the Old Testament. Well, that's true. Most of it is, but it's also included in the New Testament. And here's the truth. What I find in the New Testament is usually more challenging than what they had in the Old Testament. The truth is that the old way of doing things was sort of do the things, check them off the list, give your 10%, move on. The new way of doing things, what did Jesus say? You've heard it said. Oh, man, when Jesus says you've heard it said, watch out. Jesus said, you've heard it said, don't kill your brother or sister, right? No murder. But I tell you, don't be angry or hate them. Which is harder? He said, you know, the Old Testament says, do not commit adultery, but a new commandment I give to you, don't lust. If your hand offends you, cut it off. If your eye offends you, pluck it out. How serious does he take things? You know, Jesus says, it's not that he can't, here's what Jesus said. I didn't come to do away with the law, I came to fulfill it. See, Jesus is less concerned with us checking off the box and doing all the right things as he is with our heart beginning to change and become more like his heart and us wanting to do the right thing. Tithing was just a duty in the Old Testament. Jesus said he wants it to be a delight for us. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7. God loves a cheerful giver. Some people, they give, but they're like, I'll give. It's less about giving and more about the motivation behind it. Some people give because they think God will bless them more if they do. Some people say, I will give my dime out of my dollar. I'll give my dollar out of my 10. I'll give my 100 out of my 1,000 because then I expect God to bless me more. I expect my bank account to swell up. And that's not the right motivation either. We don't give out of obligation. We give out of love and obedience. Now, God does bless us. He does continue to do that. The question is, how much do you really love Jesus? I know you say you do, but do you love him enough to be obedient? Listen, do you love your parents enough to do what they told you to do when you were a kid? And the answer is, let's be honest, sometimes yes and sometimes no. Someone who used to be a child who's now a parent, I understand a little more how much obedience blesses the heart of a son. And the question is, how much are you willing to bless your father's heart by simply just being obedient? I think we should have bumper stickers made up. Maybe somebody can help me with this. The bumper sticker just needs to say, tithe if you love Jesus. Any fool can honk the horn, right? Because the truth is, put your money where your mouth is. Do you love God enough to believe what he says is true? Or do you think you can't do without what he's entrusted you with? See, we say we understand. We say we trust God. I think about other faiths and other, people who are believing lies. I think about Muslims and how radical some of them are about everything. They're willing to die in a plane crashing into a building, and we won't give 10%. Some of God's people moan and groan over 10%, and there are people in the Buddhist faith that live on 10% and give the rest away. I wonder what that does. God has a definite plan. And the question is, do you trust your plan or his plan more? He also has a designated place. He has a definite plan, and he has a designated place that he wants your tithe to go to. And listen, this is the part where everybody says, okay, here's what he's trying to do. I don't have any agenda. I'm just trying to tell you what the Bible says. Here's what God says. God says the local church is where your membership is. It's where you're being fed. It's where you're being taught the Word of God. It's where you're being discipled. It's where you're being challenged. It's where you're able to meet together and worship God. If you're not a member of a local church, you need to be. But wherever your membership belongs, that is where your tithes should go. Malachi 3:10, again, we talked about that verse. It talks about the storehouse. It refers to the storehouse in the Old Testament temple. the storehouse, is just a little short history, is part of the temple. They lived in an agricultural setting, okay? And what they did is when they had their harvest, they would literally bring the first 10% of the wheat or the first 10% of the corn or whatever their crop was, they would bring it into the storehouse of the temple. So they would literally bring 10% of their crop to the temple. So that temple had a storehouse. When they had a herd and they gave birth to animals, they would bring the first one out of the first 10, and then they would have, the 11th one would come to the temple, and they would be given to the temple that way. It was used to feed the priests. It was used for animal sacrifices. It was used as money to exchange for the continuing work of God. The tithe was brought to the place where the people worshiped. And that's what that verse is talking about. Today, the local church, the storehouse, is wherever you meet to worship. That is where you're supposed to bring your tithe. And some people say, well, what if I want to support some other ministry? What if I want to support some? That's fine. God wants you to do that. But He wants your local 10% first. And if you want to give above and beyond that, then that's called an offering. See, we talk about tithe and offering. Some people give, I know someone who gives 37% of their income. That sounds like a weird number, but it's the number that works for them. They don't go to church here. But I know someone who gives 37% of their income, and they came to that figure based on, they figured out what they could live on, and they wanted to give the rest. And it's important for us to understand, though, it has always been God's method. He has always used His people to support the work of the local church. And that's what the tithe does. Yes, the living waters of life flow freely here. Everyone's welcome. Everyone's free to participate. But the pipes that it gets here in sometimes cost more money. Okay? And it's important for us to understand that what does that money go to? Does it go? Yes, it goes to love your neighbor. Yes, it goes to support our missions outreach. You know what else it goes to? It goes to the light bill. It buys supplies for the nursery. It goes to the mortgage on the building we're sitting in. It goes to the utility bill. It goes to the air unit that was repaired last week. How many of y'all love to have air conditioning here? How many of y'all were here during the time when we had a service where it was broken? Aren't you glad we fixed it? Guess where the money for that came from? See, people love to give to stuff. If there's a need, I promise you, when we had Christmas boxes that needed shipping and there wasn't enough money in the fund and they were going to say, well, we got to stop packing boxes. I was like, keep packing boxes. Somebody will give the shipping money. I was right. Plenty of people did. You know why? People love to give to things like that. You know what people don't like to give to? Utility bills. They're like, I got one of those of my own. That's not fun. That's not glamorous. To give over and above your tithe is not bringing to the storehouse. That's not something God's commanded. That's something you do because you want to. But bringing to the storehouse, the designated place, as much as you may want to support other things, your tithe is expected to be a blessing at the place where you're. Look at that verse. I don't want y'all to take my word for it. Malachi chapter 3, verse 10 through 11. It says, bring all the tithe into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. And what is he trying to say? So the church can do what it's supposed to do. So the supplies are there, so the money's there. Bring enough food, bring enough, we give money instead, but bring so that it'll be there. If you do this, says the Lord, the heaven's armies will open the window of heaven for you and pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. You think about that. God, this is one of the few places in the Bible where God says, you do this, I will bless you. Now, this is not, you give me $1, I give you 10. This is not what God's saying. God is saying, I will bless you. How does that blessing happen? A lot of different ways. But notice the next part. This is the only place in the Bible I see God say, test me. He says, try it. Try it. In my Bible, there's an exclamation point after that. Try it. Put me to the test. Other places God says, don't test me. That's not right. This is the one issue He says, test me. God says, test me. Normally, we're not supposed to tempt God. We're not supposed to test God. But He has this unconditional promise that if you'll be obedient in what He said to do with your money, you will see fruit from that. And people will say, I can't afford the tithe. Don't ever get caught saying that. Don't ever get caught saying that, because it reveals that tithing is something you think you do last versus something you do first. Tithing It's supposed to be the first fruits. They brought the very first part of their crop to the temple. When you get your paycheck, the first thing you need to do is think about pulling your tithe out. I love our app because as soon as I get paid and put it in the bank, I can give. I love the fact that I can do that. You can set it up to be a recurring gift where you don't even think about it. It just happens. That's how mine works. And you can choose to do it however you want to. But God says, don't give me your leftovers. Give me the first 10% so that I can bless the 90. Because here's what happens. If you wait till you've spent 90%, what you'll find out is you spent 95%. And it's important for, listen, if I invite you over, I've told this before, but it seemed to get a reaction last time, so I'm going to say it again. If I invite you over for lunch today, and I tell you I want to prepare a meal for you, and you show up and I open the refrigerator and I start digging through, and well, I got leftover corn dog here. Who wants that? Well, we got some chicken left from this, and I start heating up things in the microwave and piecemealing it together. Do you feel very honored as a guest? How many of y'all want to come to that meal? But that's sometimes how we do God when it comes to the tithe. God really does bless me, and He really does provide for me. And I just want to be grateful enough to return 10% back to Him. And some people say, well, God really blesses me. If I win that lottery, then I'll give. Then I'll tithe. And that's getting the cart before the horse. That's saying if I get $1,000, I'll give $100, but I'm not willing to give up my dime for my dollar. And how silly does that sound? God says, test me and see if this isn't true. As believers, you will never be free until you're willing to be obedient to God, including being obedient in the area of tithing. Y'all are real quiet this morning. I know this is an unpleasant message. What is the truth? No Christian can skip over this step. Your faith will not grow if you're not being obedient in the area of money. Here's how I know that. Because money will become your God instead of God. It will take over your mind. You will worry about it. You will stress out about it. You'll wonder how you're going to make ends meet. And when you tithe, there is always a blessing. And I don't want you to misunderstand this. There's also, the Bible talks about things that God will test you in this too. When you tithe, it's not just about that. Let's go back and read the verses before verse 10 and 11 in Malachi. Look at verse 8. It says, should people cheat God? You realize that when you owe somebody something, you don't give it to them, it's cheating, right? Should people cheat God? Yet you have cheated me. But you ask, what do you mean? When did I ever cheat you? Talking about God. You cheated me of the tithe and the offering due to me. You are under a curse, for your whole nation has been cheating. And he's talking to the Israelites at this point. But do you think God punishes people for not tithing? Do you think maybe that He withholds some blessings because people don't give? There's a definite purpose. There's a designated place, and there's a definite portion of percentage. There's a designated place, and there's a divine purpose behind giving. Listen, we don't give just because. We give because God asked us to. That should be enough. But beyond that, we give because we believe in the mission He's assigned to us. Some of you know that our mission here at the church is a divine purpose that God has called us to. And we're to connect our hearts to God's heart. That is why we meet on Sunday mornings. That's why we teach from His Word. That's why we connect our heart to His heart. We're also here to connect people with God. Connect with, their heart to God's heart. Listen, everyone is welcome to come in. We give so that the bank can do what they do to lead us in worship, to prepare us to hear God's Word. We give so that the children listen, they are learning more over there than you will ever understand. And some of you think they're just playing with blocks, but they're not. They are hearing a message. They're growing closer to understanding the truth about God. They're making decisions and following Christ. And that takes cookies. That takes bribes, right? That takes all kinds of stuff. It takes workers. Listen, this is not just about being obedient in the area of money. How many people are over there working this morning? Listen, I think the tithe applies also to my time. I think every Christian should have a place, a mission with outside the church, where they're reaching out to reach the people who don't know Jesus, and they should all find a ministry within the church. I think that applies too. Could you choose to miss out on God's great plan? Can you choose to Oh, you're not going to mess up God's plan. Let me just say that on the front end. You're not going to mess up God's plan, but you might miss it. If you don't do what God calls you to do, you know what he does? He finds another way. He finds someone else who will. Sometimes you're not going to mess up his plan, but oftentimes you can miss God's great blessings. Being part of what he's doing. The mission of this church is threefold. Go ahead and go to that next slide. The mission of this church is simply, the church is about connecting to God, connecting with people, and connecting the world with the message of Christ. This is what the church is. Those are the three things we're doing. We want to connect our heart to God's heart, and we want to connect with people, both, listen, two kinds of people. We want to connect with other believers so we can encourage each other. How many of y'all are part of a life group? Raise your hand. I want to see. If your hand's not up, you need to go by the connection desk and find a life group to be part of. We connect with other people, and we also connect with people outside the church who are far from God so we can earn the right to be heard and share the message with them, because that ties into the third one. We want to connect the world with the message of hope, the message that God has for them. And we choose to do that. We choose to do that through cooperating through the tithe. You can choose what you think is best. You can choose to control life yourself, or you can choose to do what only God can do by giving him what belongs to him and letting him do what he needs to do with it. I kept thinking, I talked about this subject before, and I was telling the finance team, they said, you probably need to preach on this again. I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm trying to come up, I feel like I repeat myself. I feel like I'm telling y'all the same thing I've told you before. And I thought, I was trying to think of a new way to communicate this, and I got thinking about, how many of y'all know the monkeys are over in Africa? I don't want to gross you out, but they like to eat them over there, right? Do you know how they trap the monkeys in Africa? A monkey trap. Here's how they do that. They get a coconut, they hollow it out, and they put a hole in it, and they put they screw this thing into it, they put a chain on it, and chain it around a tree, and they put fruit in there. And the monkey comes along, and he sticks his hand in and he grabs the fruit. And then he realizes he can't get his hand out because now he's got a fist. And he can't get his hand out, and he's stuck. Show him the picture of the monkey. I'm not making this up. This is actual. They call it a monkey trap. And he's stuck there. And he'll pull and he'll tug. And you know what he won't do? He won't let go of that fruit. And he'll pull and he'll tug, and he'll pull and he'll tug, and they walk up with a club and hit him in the head. Instead of letting go of that fruit and running away, this monkey commits monkeycide. And let somebody walk up and hit him in the head. He he just says, I'm willing to die for this. I'm willing to die for this. Trees full of fruit. I'm going to die for this because I want to open my hand. And some of y'all are laughing, but I mistyped this when I was writing my notes, and I told Renee I'm not going to tell y'all this because it would sound smarter if I just figured this out on my own. But when I first typed this, I accidentally forgot to type the K in. Look what that looks like. The monkey trap is a money trap. If I reach in here and ball my fist up, I'm stuck. Uh-oh. The world will walk up and hit me in the head. But all I got to do is open my hand up. You guys can really start playing if you want to. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter about the money. The question is what the money does to you. If the money becomes so important that you grab onto it and hold on to it, your hand is closed and God can't pour a blessing into it. Several years ago, I gave an illustration where I went to the bank and got as many dimes as they let me have, a big old bag of dimes. And I put 10 in the hand, and I held on to them. I had somebody come up here, and I kept pouring the money over their hand. They couldn't get any more money in their hand because they were holding on to the 10. They'd open their hands. You know how many more dimes they could hold? See, the problem is we want to hold on to what God's already blessed us with, and he says, if you'll just open your hand, I will open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing so great you can't receive. Does God know what you need? Not what you want. Does he know what you need? Will he provide that? Look at the birds. Undoubtedly, people today are committing financial suicide because they won't let go and let God be in charge of their life. And so the reason we talk about this is not because we're in a crisis with the budget, because we're not. We're ahead of the budget today. It's not because, we've got plans and because we do that we want to do, that it's going to take finances to do that. God has all that under control. The reason we're talking about this today is because your heart needs to hear it. Your heart needs to understand that God can't bless someone who won't trust Him. And the way we begin to demonstrate that, the elementary way we can demonstrate that is by opening our hand and returning 10% of what He's blessed us with to demonstrate, God, I trust you. It's a trust fund. It's a trust fund. God, I trust you enough to give you control of every area of my life, including my finances, which is precious to me. And when we do that, we find it easier to say, you know what, God? I need to give you some of my time, too. I probably need to spend time connecting my heart to your heart by praying and reading your word. And that challenge about the whole fruit of the Spirit, which one do I need to focus on this year? I probably need to do that. And when we begin to go down that road, we begin to draw close to God. The Bible says, if you'll draw close to me, I'll draw close to you. If you'll draw close to me, I will draw close to you. Do you want to draw close to God? Do you want 2019 to be better than 2018? Then open your hand. For some of you this morning, you're like, I give, I tithe, I even give offering, and that's great. You're ready to make that next step. That next step is, what is God calling you that's going to draw you closer to Him? What is the area of your life maybe where you're not being obedient? Maybe there's unforgiveness you're not willing to resolve. Maybe there's things you owe people and you need to get that straightened out. I don't know what it is. Whatever God is calling you to do, maybe some of you this morning are hearing this message and listen, if you're sitting there mad because I talked about money, this message was for you. If you get nervous when anyone starts talking about what God's Word says about tithing, that's a good indication you need to pray about whether that's something you're not doing that you need to. You don't know my situation. Everybody's situation is different. You know what everybody thinks they are? The exception. You know what everybody isn't? The exception. Your life is not any more difficult. I know you're dry or broke. God can handle that too, right? I know that your car needs repairing. Mine does too. I got a little red light comes on every now and then. God will work that stuff out if you're faithful and obedient to do things His way. Let's pray together. Dear God, I pray now as we close this service, if someone needs to respond, Lord, I don't know what the situation is. If someone needs to come forward and make a public commitment, that's fine. But God, it may be that someone needs to evaluate their heart. Is the money thing sensitive to them because it's personal or because it points out someone they're not being obedient? God, I pray that you'd help us to learn the truth and to walk faithfully in it so that you can bless us and so that our heart can be right. It's in Jesus' name we ask.
If you'll be seated, we've got a few announcements today before we move into our business meeting. Our 4-year-old and kindergarten class is collecting canned goods for RIFA to teach the kids about meeting other people's needs. If anyone would like to contribute, see Miss Arlene Reed, and she can tell you what they're looking for. Our men's weekly breakfast fellowship starts back this Thursday, January the 17th, and every Thursday after there at 6 a.m. at Denny's at exit 85. Friday, January 25th, the youth are having a late night fellowship from 6 p.m. to midnight. We will start here at the church, be going to Sky Zone, then be back to the church, and we're doing this with right now 4 other churches have agreed to participate But anyway, the cost is $20, and that covers everything, but primarily it goes to Sky Zone. So anyway, they do not have to pay in advance. They can bring their money that night. We just need to kind of know by next Sunday how many are planning to attend. Our women's ministry will be having a ladies' luncheon on January the 27th, which is Sunday, January the 27th at 12:30, for the ladies to get to know one another and talk about what they want to do in the women's ministry this year in 2019. Please bring finger foods to share. And again, that's women's ministry, ladies' luncheon, January 27th.